Constructing your life is about much more than just building a bank account. Each week, join real estate entrepreneur and mindset coach Austin Linney as he interviews guests who are constructing their dream lives and impacting the world around them on a daily basis. If you're an entrepreneur or wanting to start a business, or you just want to hear motivating stories of how others have overcome the odds, you are in the right place. And now for your host, Austin Linney.
All right, guys, welcome back. This is Austin Linney, Construct Your Life podcast. I am so grateful to be here today, and I hope you are too, ready to take your life to the next level. We're going to talk about building a lifestyle, not a bank account. And I am beyond grateful to have Tyler Chesser here today, a broker, a multifamily investor, a coach. Apparently, I looked at that on your bio. I didn't know that, so we might have to talk about that too. So happy to have you here, Tyler.
Absolutely, Austin, man. It's a pleasure, and I'm grateful to see that this seed that we planted is now sprouting. This is official, so yeah. Man, it's a pleasure to be here with you.
Man, it's a pleasure. You know, life's funny. We were at the best conference ever, Joe Fairless, a couple weeks ago in February, and there are people that you meet, and you just like saddle up next to them, and you want to be around that energy. And I know I'm that way because I've been told enough. But this guy right here is one that would be an understatement. Positive, thoughtful, so many things. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey to being a real estate investor, a coach, kind of stuff like that, get everybody up to speed?
Sure. Absolutely. Well, I appreciate those kind words. And, to me, I think the most important thing is bringing good energy, and whether or not it's always positive, it's resourceful, it's thoughtful. It's, it's not survival mentality. It's more of how are we going to thrive. And so that's what I try to do on a daily basis. And, of course I fall flat on my face all the time, especially in these types of circumstances that we sit here in. As we just talked before the show started, obviously we're sitting here in late March 2020, and everybody who's listening to this knows what's happening, at that point in our kind of world history, but pretty bizarre. So definitely all the mindset work is super important, especially now. But in terms of your question of, who I am and what's been my journey to get to this point, when I actually started my kind of, professional career as, a corporate employee. I went to school and did everything that I was told to do, and, get the good grades and then go get the internship, which then leads to, the full-time job there. And I was a, marketing professional as I started. And, I learned a lot about how to be a professional, how to operate in an environment such as a corporate environment, in that sort of structure. And, I learned pretty quickly that it was about, a lot about politics and a lot about who do you know, who likes you, and how can you sort of ride some coattails. And, I don't mean to poo-poo on that whole environment, but that was something that I learned pretty early. But I also learned, that I did really enjoy, tapping into the behavior of individuals and people just through psychology. And that's why I love marketing, because you can communicate things either subliminally or subconsciously to, encourage certain behavior and to encourage certain loyalty and brand sort of equity, so to speak. And so I found that to be super fascinating, and I still do. I still love branding. I still love psychology. And that's why, really a lot of what has caused me to, experience some success in real estate is because I've applied those thinkings towards real estate as a broker, as an investor, as a coach for real estate investors. It's all about psychology. It's all about what's going on in between your ears, in between your eyeballs, and so to speak. And, especially also, how do you tie that into your body, into your spirituality? And as we were talking about earlier, your energy, and how can you combine all of these forces together towards creating, like what you are all about is constructing that life. Right. And my mission is to elevate to a life without limits and to allow others to do the same. And my philosophy has been that real estate investing, in addition to personal growth, in addition to, committing to just being defiantly committed and being resourceful and doing whatever it takes, really is the combination of those forces is what creates the opportunity to live a life without limits. And real estate certainly can give you practicality in your life, from a cash flow perspective, from a wealth creation perspective. But we obviously know right now is another reminder to us that we've got to focus on cash flow and not net worth. We've got to focus on, cash flow, not value, and, what's our debt structure and all these kind of things. Because look, we've got to have, cash in our life to be able to do what we want to do. If you want to do anything you want to do, then you've got to have that. And so the sort of the path for me has been, through reading books. I mean, I'm a huge reader. I read a book a week, and I've continued to just stack that on top of itself in terms of learning, building a network, with folks like yourself, whether it's, in my market or across the country, sort of building a deep network. And that's really been, the success for me has been from my own inner work. Like, what have I developed myself? What kind of understandings have I, developed within, how have human beings evolved over the past 13,000 years or 7 million years? And how can I apply that learning to today to thrive in this type of environment? Because, it's pretty interesting where we're sitting right now. We're sitting in a place of, most people have fear or doubt or worry about, man, is the worst case scenario happening? And, I think something that I always try to remind myself, I'm a huge fan of Tony Robbins and guys like that. And, he always says that life happens for you and not to you. And so it's a reminder, that I have to, continually, it's like every single morning I've got to get up and really kind of develop this reminder of these kind of things that no matter what happens today, it's going to serve me, in the future. And so I don't know, man, I'm also just the type of guy who likes to have some fun. I love to travel. I love to meet new people, have conversations like this. And I don't know, man, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's a general start to the conversation.
That was great. I'm definitely going to steal that life without limits thing. That's my new thing right now. I like that.
For sure.
Me too. I was a psychology major as well, and spent 20 years behind the bar. So if that's not psychology, I don't know what is.
There you go.
And I think, what you said there is perfect. And I think there is a vehicle, right? Because I think if I had to guess, because I think you're a lot like me, really the most joy you probably get out of is the coaching part, is the travel.
Yeah,
because
100%.
Me too. And so there's something I'd like to be doing, and then there's a vehicle to get me to where I want to go. Yep. And what was it? First of all, what was it, and how long did it take for you to switch from, okay, I'm doing marketing, I have a great job, and then I'm going to throw all that away and bet on myself, right? And what was the time frame? How long did that take? Were you doing some side work as you were doing it? Did you just jump all in? Like when you have somebody like somebody that's listening right now that has a job, they're making good money, but you've made a choice, a harder path to go out it on an own. What did you tell yourself when you made that move?
Well, it's interesting because I didn't think it was a harder path going into it. And I'm glad that I was dumb to realize that it wasn't a harder path. But at first I thought it was the easier path because, it was interesting looking back, like I got pushed into it. And this is another example of life happening for you and not to you, because in that circumstance, I was having some challenges, some practical challenges that most of your listeners probably have faced at one point in time. Is how am I going to, number one, how am I going to pay my bills, or how am I going to get beyond just thinking about paying my bills, right? Mm-hmm. So when you have unexpected things happen in your life from a bill perspective or from a financial perspective, you start to feel pressure, right? Mm-hmm. And I felt that, early on, probably, I'd say 3 years into my corporate journey, I started to think, all right, I got beat down in the beginning because I thought I have a college degree, I'm valuable. And I came in and I clearly, my value was not reflected in what I was actually valued from a financial perspective from the company. And so I had to swallow my pride there a little bit. But over a few years, I started to think, all right, well, wait a minute. Now I'm starting to actually be valuable. But things were happening in my life that were unexpected. I had, repairs and things happening to my house, that I'd purchased, and it really started to compound on itself. And so I started to feel very, sort of squeezed from a financial perspective because I was crazy. I mean, literally crazy things happened. I had a bee colony was built in the side of my house. It was 30,000 bees that I had to cut out of the wall. And this wasn't even that expensive of a deal. It was just like exhausting trying to figure out, like, got to get a beekeeper over there. You can't smoke them out because they're endangered, blah, blah, blah. That was one thing that happened. I had, pipes breaking under the garage. You had to jackhammer up the garage, do the same in the front yard. I had a huge root that grew into the main electric line coming into the house. So the only reason I say all this stuff is because it was like, dude, it was totally life happening. And it was like, all right, am I the victim, or is this going to create something new for me? And it pushed me to a point where it's like, all right, I need to ask some serious questions about finances, because it was interesting. I look back and I didn't ever, budget for like repairs and maintenance on the house, which is so obviously like primitive in many ways. But as I started to recognize that this was just a reality, I was like, all right, let me just figure out how do I earn more money, and I would go to my boss and basically say, hey, look, it's time to recognize that, an increased value here. And, I would get the raises. I would get, 2-3% sort of cost of living raises, but I never got anything substantial that I felt that I should or needed, frankly. And so I started to ask more questions of myself, like, what else is there? What other ways are there for me to make money? And long story short, I started to just kind of ask these questions of other people too. What other things could I be doing? Because I felt like I was on the path that I was always told. And it's like, I'm doing exactly what I was told to do. And I'm like, wait a minute, there's going to be other unexpected things that happen in my life. So am I always just going to be financially pinched? That doesn't sound like a life that I want to live. And I was working, a lot. I was doing conference calls with folks in the Middle East and Asia and South America and all these different places. I'd be taking the morning shift one day, the night shift the next day. And I'm like, all right, hold up. I'm busy and I don't have any money. This is not cool. So then I started to ask these questions and try to figure out what else is out there. And I know this is a super long-winded answer, but I found out that real estate could be another avenue for me. And the avenue that it could be for me was through sales. And so I went and got my real estate license. I could do that sort of moonlighting and going out and figuring out. It's interesting because I literally got a no interest credit card to get my real estate license, which I don't even know how much it cost me. It wasn't that, it was $1,000 or less. And, I wasn't completely broke, but I mean, looking back, I was probably pretty broke. So I literally put the licensure on the card, got the license, and started to build a business on the side. And I said, all right, I'm going to set a date, and this is my goal, to be full-time into real estate as a salesperson. And so I started building my business, but then I started learning more about real estate because I was actually selling houses to start with. And I started selling houses and I started making some extra cash, which was nice. It helped me with some breathing room. But then I learned, wow, I don't really like selling houses. So then I started to learn more. And of course, many of the folks listening know Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad. When I read that book, my whole life was changed. Because then I recognized that it wasn't necessarily about trading my time for money, which is what I was doing as an agent still, to a different degree. But then I learned about real estate investing and owning assets rather than liabilities and setting up my life differently than my whole, like everybody had told me to go get more valuable, to go trade my time for more money, when I recognized that I could trade, my expertise for assets, or my, and then trade my assets for more assets that then pay me and pay others around me and create the practicality. So then I became a real estate investor. And as I learned that, I made every single mistake in the book. I'm telling you, I didn't have a team. I didn't have a strategy. I didn't have systems. I didn't have the mindset appropriately, because I was making all these mistakes and losing money. And I'll tell you what, I was going through a spiral. It was a negative downward spiral. And so I just became so obsessed with my own personal growth and learning more about psychology and how my own mind works and how I know every other human being's mind works as well. And so developing my own systems, my own strategy, that's when I started coaching others, because I was able to dig myself out of, a little bit of a hole. And I said, you know what, this is pretty exciting, because, I could have gone the opposite direction. I could have just said, you know what, I'm going to throw in the keys, and I'm not cut out to be a real estate investor. But I think because of that early failure and because of those challenges, I've come out stronger on the other side. And it's another example of life happening for me and not to me. If I would have hit a home run in the first deal, I probably would have just said, you know what, I'm a natural at this. This is super easy. And in the future, I would do bigger deals, and I would probably, it's going to catch up with you, the school of the hard knocks. So yeah, man, I think this has really kind of been my journey, but every day is a new piece of this journey, man. We're in the next chapter right now.
Amen. And, people, especially new investors, if you talk to them all the time, that's the main concern. The main concern is, what if there's a tree what if there's bees? Guess what? There are going to be what ifs. And those what ifs create a foundation to remove yourself emotionally from the transaction, to look at the numbers and to make things work. And, because I do Airbnb and you talk to clients, Airbnb is the Wild West, and people want to put it in a box, and you can't. And it's just, I view it the same way with real estate. It took me 7 years to get my first deal, and then I bought 3 houses in a year. So, I think that's how it works. I think what's exciting for me as I talk to you is that do you think the defining moment to stop the negative spiral? Because I've been there 9 million times. And there is a moment, right, where you could have easily handed everything back, and you could have said, I'm going to go back to my marketing job, and I'm going to be that guy, that normal dude. And guess what? Your struggles are not going to stop, tomorrow or the next day. So what do you think? Was it the people you were around? Was it the books you're reading? Like the talks you had with yourself? What do you think was the true defining moment in that?
It was definitely all of the above, because I think, I think there's not just one component of your own personal growth that is like the silver bullet. I was still continuing to invest in my own learning and figure out new strategies and figure out, new systems that I could implement. And it was like, I fumbled my way to creating systems and strategies and an approach that worked. And it took me a long time. I mean, honestly, it took me several years before I actually had what worked. And I still continue to refine my systems and strategies. So don't get me wrong, there's always room for improvement. But, as far as a moment, I mean, honestly, like one thing that I would say was a moment, it was probably a moment before I got into the moment. I always had the mindset of, if I'm going to commit to something, I'm not going to throw up the white flag. There's, I think that was deep seated within me that, what, like if I sign on debt, there's no way I'm going to hand the keys back,
Sure.
Unless there's literally no other option to me. So I just always had that sort of mindset that, look, there's no other option but success here. Mm-hmm. And I just continued to say, you know what, this feels overwhelming. It feels like I'm pushing a boulder up a mountain. And there's some days where I just want to like let this thing just crush me and just like lay down and forget about it. And granted, I mean, there was days where I just had to take a breather and just like, man, I got to take a step back from this thing. Mm-hmm. But I think that was sort of my mindset going into it. And I don't think I was conscious of that, but that was it. It was like, man, I have no choice but to figure this out. And it sucked, man. It sucked really bad. It was super hard. I mean, I had, first deal I ever did was, a small multifamily property, 8 units. Mm-hmm. And, half of my tenants were delinquent, sort of bad tenants. So they were totally bad debt. Mm-hmm. And then of course, all of them were professional tenants. So they were all, I know. I'm sure many of the listeners know what a professional tenant is. And so when I bought that property, it's funny because like I read in every single book. So this goes back to the reading. You have to mix book knowledge with street knowledge and real life knowledge. Mm-hmm. And this gave me both of that from a micro perspective. But, I read in the books, it's like, man, you've got to evaluate the deal and look at your cash flow and what does that cash on cash look like? And what is your year one cap rate and what's your strategy for adding value and all these different things. Mm-hmm. And you had to throw it all up in the air when I bought that property because half the tenants were like, it was a loaded rent roll. So I basically got, screwed over by the seller So I bought this deal. Half the tenants weren't paying rent, so I had to file eviction on them. And of course, they know this process. They've done this before. They have nothing to lose. And so it's months before I could get, any of these people out of there. And of course, then they destroy the units. So not only my budget that I, set up to renovate the units was much higher than I expected, but also it happened much quicker. And so, not having the appropriate funds in place to be able to do that, other than just like scramble and make sure that my main business was I was selling investment property as a broker, and I was funding that like frantically, like, all right, we got to close this deal so then we can fund this rehab project. And then of course you got the contractors who are screwing you and not showing up and all these different things and all the unexpecteds too. I mean, pipes freezing, whatever it is. I mean, you name it. Here's the thing.
I feel like you're making it up, dude.
Dude, it sounds like I'm making it up, but it's like what I learned is that the worst case scenario is possible.
Sure.
And what do you do when that happens? So you got to think ahead.
I want to stay here because this is the rub, guys. This is the worst nightmare when everybody's that new is sitting at home and they're laying in bed and they're sweating. This is what they're thinking of.
Yes.
Oh, they're going to tear up the units. Oh, they're not going to pay rent. Oh, they're not going to. So we're going to, so you're saying, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to figure it out. And I'm going to go out on a venture to guess that this property made you a ton of money. And this property probably spurred you along for your next purchase, right? See, I didn't even know that stuff. And I knew it.
Totally. Well, I mean, one of the best books I've ever read is Think and Grow Rich. I mean, many people know about that book, but what he says is that every adversity is the seed for a greater, opportunity in the future. And I totally probably butchered that, but it's true. And it was true on this one as well. But it just, man, it was like tuition. It was like, oh, you think you're a real estate investor. Okay. Well, let's see how that goes. And I mean, honestly, yeah, it took me probably 2.5 years to really dig myself out of the gutter and then like get my feet underneath me and just like going.
And you didn't have the network you have now, right?
Exactly.
So that's when you're like, oh man, if I would have had the network I had now, like I could probably save this, but then you wouldn't have the experience, right? And then you wouldn't have the issue. So let's just give them some tangible data.
Yeah.
You were in for this. It cost this. If you just could remember, like, what do you think you wound up like coming out ahead on that one after all that?
Yeah. So I bought the deal for $310,000 and sold it for, so I put in probably $100 worth of improvements.
410. Yeah.
410. Yeah. And I sold it for $500. So, I think it was fine. I mean, it worked out, but here's the thing. I mean, did my whole life change from a financial perspective? No, but it absolutely was a win. I mean, if I look back, the IRR was tremendous, including, I was able to get the deal to cash flow over the period of time as well. And obviously all the other benefits, but the biggest, most valuable piece was my learning, my experience.
Sure.
And then obviously just being in the trenches. I mean, it's so different to learn by doing than to learn by reading. And I still believe in both. I still read every single day. But it's a matter of how do you apply? Like, if I'm going to read something, it's like, well, what can I do with this today? And then do I get the same feedback that I expected? If not, what do I need to do different? And so, yeah, man, it was a great experience. And it's something I didn't want the entire time. Like I didn't want to go through any of this. And I heard somebody say this, about a year ago that said, it's not personal growth if it's easy. And I know that's true because, a lot of times you want personal growth to be like this pretty, nice little thing that fits in the little box over here. But I tell you what, man, it's a matter of like, how uncomfortable are you? And I know looking back that the discomfort that I experienced for a long period of time was what kind of allowed me to go the other side. And I've acquired more and more deals ever since. And I know now it's like, all right, what do we do in this scenario? Have we budgeted for this? And I know my pro formas are a lot different than they were then. So yeah, it was an interesting experience for sure.
Yeah. And it's funny because, it did take me a long time to buy my first deal, but I kind of saw the tea leaves. I kind of saw what was happening in the city. And I don't have a problem telling you that my house went up 200 grand in 2 years. Like, because, I bought the nicest house in the neighborhood and the neighborhood was changing. Well, last year I lost money on a company I started. And I have learned more from losing that money than ever. And you know what? My friend told me, and I tell you, it changed my life, because I was playing the victim for a couple of days. What if, all that BS. And he said, hey, have you ever run a business before? I said, no. He said, did you go to business school? No. Okay. Well, then treat the $20,000 you lost as the best business degree you ever had, because you were building a business with actual business partners, and you've learned more about yourself. And I tell everybody, that was the game changer, man.
Yeah. I mean, I know you know this, and I'm sure you felt this, but like when you lose money, you learn, and if it's a substantial amount of money, you will never forget that. Yeah. I mean, you will not make that decision. You will not make that mistake twice, because unless you've just got an endless amount of resources and it's, it is what it is. But I don't know about you, but starting out, I didn't have that. And it was like, man, this felt like life was ending, and then learning how our minds work and how our emotions work, which then lead to our actions, our behaviors, our habits, our rituals, and then our personality. That's what I became so fascinated with, because if we say, man, life is ending because we just lost money, then how do you act? You act in a way that's going to perpetuate that situation in other ways as well. So I just became hooked to that.
I gravitate big time. Anytime I hear this story, I'm like, got to talk to him. Any guy that's been a millionaire, lost it all and built it back again, that's my guy. That's my guy. I heard a story the other day. He had $3 million in the bank, lost it all, had to be an Uber driver, and now he's worth multi-millions again. And I'm like, that's my dude right there. That's amazing. I heard a story yesterday from a gentleman, Christopher Lockhead, who's literally my soul animal. This guy's a tech billionaire, and he was talking on a call about the climate that we're in. And he was talking about an ex-hockey player in California who had 3 restaurants, retired, and he was about to expand to like 20 restaurants. I mean, this dude was killing it, right? Virus comes, wipes out his entire business, right? He's literally financially ruined, have to going to pay bankruptcy, the whole 9. You know what he decided to do? He decided to open up his restaurants to feed homeless people in food banks, even though his life is in financial ruin, and he doesn't know what's going to happen on the other side of this. He doesn't know 3 months from now how he's going to pay his bills, but he decided to turn this tragedy for his business and his life into a positive for other people. That's amazing. I think through this virus, and I think through what we are going through right now, you can choose to step up, and that's what it's asking for. It's asking for leaders to step up and show the way
for sure
for the people to know that this is just a moment in time. And yes, it sucks, and people are going to lose their jobs, and businesses are going to close. But how you wake up every day and who you choose to talk to, who you choose to listen to, is gonna gravitate towards how you feel, right? And that's why I'm obsessed with multifamily investors. And the reason I'm obsessed with multifamily investors, because I've never met a group of people that has no money in their bank account that looks at a $12 million deal and they're like, we'll figure it out. And when you get around those people, don't you agree that changes your mindset? 100%.
Yeah.
I mean, it changes everything. So what I love about you, what you mentioned to me at the best conference ever, is that you own a 50 unit by yourself. And there's a lot of people walking around talking about, I've got 3,000 units. Yeah, but you might own 0.55% of the 3,000 units. So walk everybody through how you get your mind ready, because I would imagine that's a nice size purchase, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you take the Aplex and your problems get steroid, like they're supercharged with 50 units.
Well, what I can say is for sure, I'm glad that I learned on a smaller basis, because I can't imagine if I was making those same mistakes, times 5 or times 6 or whatever that multiple is. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a requirement to structure a solid deal, to do proper due diligence, to put a team in place that can handle an ongoing onslaught of problems. I mean, that's what real estate is all about problems and how do you solve problems. So that's one of the things I feel like real estate investors are in a better position in this environment, is to realize that we're always dealing with problems anyway. So, I think that we're better positioned. But I mean, I guess your question is, what's the approach from a mindset perspective to be more equipped?
Did you almost back out? Like, was there hesitation on putting your name to that much debt?
No, there wasn't. And the reason why is because I felt like I went through the gauntlet. I've already gone through the gauntlet in so many different ways that my eyes were open to what's the worst case scenario. And I put that in perspective and said, all right, if the worst case scenario happens, can we still make this deal work? And I said, yes. And this deal was, it was a home run deal. I'm going to be honest with you. It was an absolute home run deal. So that makes a huge difference. And I was able to structure the negotiation with the seller, in a way that it would really protect me. And so, I went through due diligence and recognized that really the property had much more problems than I expected going in, and it needed a ton of work. And it was an estate sale, and the heirs didn't want the property. They had their managers were stealing from them. There was all these problems happening. And so we said, look, man, take it or leave it. But this what actually needs to happen if we're going to do this deal. And I was able to receive a credit for, renovations of the property that were really very much needed. I mean, there was 10 down units. There was, sewers backing up in half the units. There was electric problems. All the windows were shot. The roofs were shot. Trying to think what else. The decks.
But I would venture to guess that 50% of investors are going to walk away from that deal. So how did you tell yourself, like, look, this is gonna suck. we're gonna work through this, but this is the deal that could change my life, and you have to be ready to step up in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest thing was recognizing that anything is possible. That's the belief, and that's the identity that I have cultivated, over the past few years with my consistent sort of personal growth. And the people that I surround myself with are not like, woe is me. It's more like, hey, anything's possible, and let's open our minds to creativity, right? Like, what's the solution? Like, what Robert Kiyosaki says is one example, is like, the difference is, I can't afford this, or how can I afford this? Right. So the question is, all right, I can't fix this situation, or how can I fix this situation? How can I put resources together to make this happen? So that was my belief, and that's been my identity ever since. And so when I have a challenge, like when I was doing the deal, it was like, dude, the original terms of this deal do not make sense after we now have a full understanding of what's going on. And I'm not the type of person who retrades deals or that kind of stuff. But at this point, it was like, look, like at the end of the day, it is business. And for us to make sense of this, here's what it needs to be. And if that's not the case, I totally get it. Like, please feel free to go and do this deal with anyone else. But we were able to have an intelligent conversation, between all parties, and say, look, here's what other people are probably going to say as well, from, the operations perspective, from the, CapEx perspective, and from all of the future challenges of this deal. And so, do you want to work it out with us? If not, it's totally fine. I mean, like, we're not making you do this, but does that make sense? I mean, that's kind of how I look at it.
It's 100%. And what I think people get wrapped up in, and this is something I'm on hard. This is my new kind of battle cry, is I personally think that everybody's goals are BS. That's what I think. I think that they're saying they want to be a millionaire because it's the easy thing to do. They're saying they want to do this. They want this many units, right? And so people are not living their life from intention, right? I live a life of intention. I don't live a life of goals. And if your goal was to have 100 units in that year, whatever you say, would you have bought the deal because that was your goal and you would have overpaid because that was your goal? Or would you live in intention, like, this needs to be a good deal? And people don't understand that the people that are going to be affected in this virus on Airbnb units and multifamily is because they bought lying to themselves about what the numbers were. And what I've realized in the lending world is that there is the dream world and there's reality. Let's live in a world where there's reality, right? And you're basically telling the guy, you're laying out options and you're saying, bro, you can have this conversation, or you can talk with me, a guy who's ready to close, but this is where we need to be because it makes sense. There's a lot of people that would be scared to have that conversation with the seller because they might lose the deal. Because I heard something the other day that's amazing and I live by it. Everybody's worried about what they'll give up by telling the truth. They're not worried about, they can't understand what they might gain.
Yeah.
And so you could say, oh, he's going to walk away. He's going to tell me to walk, get out of my way. Or you can lay out strategically like, hey, bro, you're going to be having the same conversation over again, or we can make it work. And at the end of the day, I think it was a win-win for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, I think that your beliefs are, what show up in your world. I mean, I truly believe that. And I think that if you feel like, oh man, he's really going to, he's going to hate this conversation. He's going to, he's going to shoot this down. You're going to come with that energy. And that is likely what the scenario plays out to be. And so my question to myself is, hey, is this conversation going to be a drastic failure? Is this going to be the worst conversation I've ever had? But what if this does work? Not what if this doesn't? What if this, what if I fail here? It's, hey, what's the opportunity for all parties if this does work? And the thing I look about real estate is that it's not a real estate business. It's a people business. It's what kind of solutions are we solving with the vehicle of real estate? And so kind of parsing out the situation and thinking through it, all angles of this, it's like, all right, the goals of the heirs of this individual are to get out from under this challenge, right? They've got managers who are stealing from them. They've got, utility bills, which were atrociously high. I mean, absolutely crazy. I mean, negative cash flow. So it's like, all right, can we identify what their outcomes are? Can we identify what my outcomes are? My team, folks are looking to solve a problem here to earn a living, so on and so forth, and match those up and then sort of structure a deal that gets everybody to where they want to go. That's one thing that I think people forget about a lot of times when they're negotiating, is that not everybody's model of the world or outcome is the same. Some people want something different. And obviously you can still have mutually beneficial outcomes that are similar. But I think identifying and having understanding, that's why when I'm negotiating, I want to ask more questions. I want to talk less. I want to listen more. And I want to know what's going on. But then I also want to show up and understand that, hey, look, I'm somebody who's here to help and to solve. And I'm not going to be somebody who's greedy. I'm not going to be, somebody who's doing a deal just for me to win. I want you to win as well. And how can we leverage each other's outcomes to help each other win?
Guys, y'all should back up that right there, because I'm letting you know right now in life, what he's talking about is everything. It will set you free. And what people don't understand, especially in the space I'm in, the Airbnb, they want to project their thoughts on a deal. It's not for you to determine what this seller needs or doesn't need. I've got a kid I'm teaching wholesaling right now. And life is about friction points. Look at it, see how you can take friction. And when you take friction out of somebody's life, the greatest story ever my mom told me, when I was a kid, there's 30 acres they wanted to buy. Dude was country as, hick. And my dad is from the city. My dad's a doctor and not really that country. And he tries to buy this property from this guy 3 different times, offers him 20K, 30K over, no, I'm good. Get out of here. So my mom goes, let me go talk to him. And so she goes, comes in, shows him the property, spends 40 minutes with him and never asked about the deal, never asked what it cost, none of that stuff. She gets back in her truck, and as she's stepping into her truck, the guy goes, hey, what the fuck? He's like, you're not even going to ask about the deal? And she goes, well, if I thought you wanted to sell it, you would have fucking told me. And he sold it to her for 20K less than he was asking.
Wow.
Don't project what you think the seller needs or wants. If you can't see eye to eye, live in an abundant mentality, walk away, and that deal, if it's meant to be, will come back to you.
Yeah.
But don't spin your wheels trying to sell somebody that can't be sold. That's just,
very well said.
Yeah.
Very well said.
And so when you get out of that scarcity mindset, because I was there. Like,
Yeah.
I'll take any deal. I don't even care. I just want to say that I got a property. Look at me. I'm a real estate investor.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that, because you want a deal, you could overpay, 30K, and then you're upside down. And then what kind of real estate investor are you? And I think that's what multifamily guys do a bunch of times.
Well,
Yeah.
dude, there's so much gold to what you're saying. And there's a couple things I just wanted to follow up on real quick because, over the past few years, it's been all about growth, do more, become more and all these different things. And of course, I'm all about that. But in terms of real estate, I do believe there's a ton of merit to what you're saying earlier about people who just set goals and no matter what, they're going to hit that goal. And I think maybe we've got to make a little bit of a shift here and say, all right, are we just looking to acquire a certain amount of, properties or units or whatever, or are we looking at the merit of these deals and do these deals make sense? Because the worst case scenario is possible. When the worst case scenario happens, are you going to be happy that you attained that goal that you just wrote on paper or whatever, several years ago, or are those deals still successful?
Sure.
So that's one thing that I thought was huge. I mean, you made a great statement there.
You get in that with multifamily, and you get in that with Airbnbs. And how great is it for me to say I've got 65 Airbnbs I manage, right?
Yeah.
But you might have 40 that don't make you money, but
right.
You can say you have 60, right? And so, and here's the rub, and this is what sucks. If you're going to set boundaries and you're going to set a standard that you're the type of client you're going to get, the valleys might be greater, right? And so you have to have the right mindset to know that you've chosen this path. My core values live in here, and I'm not going to operate outside of that. And by setting those boundaries, one of the great quotes I said, by setting boundaries, you show people where the door is. And I think that you recruit and you bring in your life the type of people that you want over and over again by setting boundaries and not just taking every deal, taking every client. And I'm sure that's what you deal with on a daily basis as a broker, I would imagine.
For sure. And I mean, the other thing I just wanted to follow up on is just the scarcity versus abundance too, is because, that perspective has got to really permeate your being. It's got to permeate your identity, because at any moment, your survival brain is trying to tell you that there's not enough resources. There's not enough time. There's not enough deals. You got to do anything it takes to get that's right in front of you, because you never know, maybe there's never another opportunity that comes. Or your mindset could be, hey, you know what? Everything is coming to me at any moment. Everything that makes sense, that works for me, is available to me. And so I can be patient. I don't have to, go back and sell a seller that doesn't want to sell to me. There's always another opportunity around the corner, or there's a reason why that deal didn't happen for me. And if it is supposed to happen, it will come back. And so I just think that it's just so important to remember that, there really is an unlimited amount of opportunities and resources out there if you believe that, and if you have the perspective of that, because your reticular activator sees what it thinks. And if you think that there's no other opportunities out there, that may be the case for you. But I've seen it the other way. And that was the negative downward spiral that I was on, that I thankfully was able to dig myself out of and start to look like where focus goes, energy flows. Another great comment or phrase that Tony Robbins uses so much is that when I focused on, solutions, when I focused on productivity, when I focused on systems and feeding my mind and not, reading into, oh man, the economy is crashing or all these different things and overwhelming my survival mind of nothing's going to work because everything's out of my control. It just, that was the shift for me. And I know that it can be the shift for everyone else if they just choose to understand that they have this within themselves right now, but it's a daily process. You've got to wake up every single day and remind yourself that, hey man, my body thinks that it might all end right now. My brain thinks that it's all over, here today or whatever, but I'm choosing to not listen to that. I'm choosing to not believe that. but I'm also choosing to create a new belief that says anything's possible. So that's a requirement for everybody to do every single day. And I know that's something that I have to do every single day.
I agree. And something I talk about on a daily basis with the guy that's working with me, the new real estate investor, never done a deal before, is I don't think people put enough stock in small wins. And, like setting goals that you want, but being obtainable to get that momentum, like we talked about before we got on the call, that momentum, those wins over and over again. And you're going to have a down here, and but those little bitty wins you're stacking daily basis. And that's what I'm finding with the Ironman training, is that it is a pure ego ripping apart your soul. And you have to get in every day, and you have to put in the work. It's the same thing, guys, with reading. It's the same thing with learning. And when you surround yourself with the people that me and him have, your net worth is your network. I mean, it is the truth, man, because he said something to me yesterday that was very interesting. His brother finally said, listen, bro, I'm so sick of you like whining and complaining. Do you know anybody? This is what he asked him. Do you know anybody that makes 80 grand a year? He goes, no. Do you know anybody that makes 100 grand a year? No. He goes, well, you're in the wrong circle. Done. And he's like, boom, get out. And he's like, oh, it was just because you can be around those people that play victims. And I refuse I'll just stop them right mid-sentence. I'm like, okay, so we can talk about this for the next hour, or we can actually come up with solutions. I'm sure you deal with this on a daily basis with the coaching, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, here's the thing. That's, I think, the natural state of most human beings is, nothing's possible, or, negativity or whatever. Because, if you study evolution, that's how we survive to pass on our genes, because the harshness of the environment that human beings have come up through over the past millions of years has required that. But guess what? Today, we're kind of evolving to a higher state of being, in my opinion. And I think to get there and really to do what's truly possible in this world, you've got to disassociate with that identity. But, that's really an ongoing basis, which I just talked about. But the momentum thing that you're talking about is also super important, because momentum can go in either direction. I think that's one of the things that most sort of high achievers right now are feeling. The momentum just
we're savages.
Stopped.
We're savages. We want to be working 18-hour days, and the world's telling you can't.
Yes, exactly. And I see this with my coaching clients all the time as well, is that momentum breeds more momentum in whichever direction. And so, I think you mentioned a very strong point in that it doesn't have to be huge things. You don't have to go out and acquire $100 million deal to gain tremendous momentum. One thing that I did this morning, to be honest with you, it's like, all right, I've still got a lot going on, during this whole situation. We can still do calls. We're still doing deals, things like that are still happening. But, what's something that, because truthfully, there's times where I feel the momentum is out of my favor as well. This morning, what I did was I went down and got my taxes organized. Like, my CPA sent me this super long email of here's all the different checks that need to go here, here, and here. And you know what? I wrote out freaking envelopes, and it honestly, like, I folded up all the papers, I put them in there, licked the envelopes. They're in a big stack now. It's the worst little job that you can ever imagine. It's like $5 an hour type of work. But you know what? It gave me some momentum. It's like, you know what? That is now organized, and now I can move on. I can now focus on this. And I can also check it off of my list. It's like, all right, now I can move on to the next task.
Sure.
And what's more important, obviously, So I think the other thing with momentum is you have to take an inventory of your own energy too. It's like, how are you feeling? How's your energy?
Sure.
If you have high energy and you're feeling like your greatest version of yourself, like for me, it's all about having a conversation. It's all about negotiating a deal. Like, that's my best output, right? It's building a relationship, those kind of things. But if I'm low energy, I probably need to do a low energy type of task to create some momentum. So you have to have that sensory acuity. And this is something that I tell my clients all the time, is you've got to read into the situation yourself and understand, am I in a hustle or am I in a flow state right now? Because there's times where you need a break too. You got to take a step back and take a breather. We're not meant to work 18-hour days. I mean, I know that is for sure. How can you work smarter and not harder? But having this understanding, I think, is really what, allows people to be more effective, because the momentum is one of the most important things, in my opinion.
Sure.
The more that you can do, the more that happens, and it all starts to compound on each other. So that's why if you can create the effective habits on a daily basis, that's when it starts to really, it's like I was talking about the boulder earlier and pushing the boulder uphill.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is when the boulder starts going downhill and you start to run behind it, because it's like, man, I can't even stop this thing if I tried.
Sure. And it's 2 points. And the reason that 2 things that changed my life, and I know that you'll agree with me too. I had a habit for many years of blaming the outside world and outside around me. There's 3 things that have changed my life. 1, extreme ownership. I'm the root of every problem, and it's my thing. 2nd is momentum, likability. People want to work with those people. And the first is realizing that everything starts and ends with me. It's as simple as that. You can do all the work and learn all the tasks, but until you truly look inside yourself, and I realized that there's things that happen in my life, and then there's a story that I told to myself that stacked on top of each other. Because I never took ownership of what I did in that moment. It wasn't until I took ownership that my life changed. And the second thing was, I decided at every turn, at every moment of every day, I'm going to provide as much value to somebody else as I can. And what I started doing, weirdest thing in the world, I don't even know why I do it now, but if I deem it necessary, if I deem that it's a good cause, I'll donate. And I'll donate money. And it's like, I never was that guy before. Not that I didn't help people, but I didn't do it as much as I do it now. And you say, well, I don't really have the $200 to spend. But I think it was Tony Robbins or somebody that said, if you don't give now, when you have no money, you won't pick up the habit later on. Yep. And you'd be amazed how much has come back my way, opportunities, things, because of that. And I can't explain it, but it's just, have you seen that in your own life?
That's a great reminder. I think that it goes back to this scarcity or abundance mindset, because I think when you give to someone else, whether it's your own resources or time or attention, you're subconsciously or subliminally messaging back to yourself that I have enough. I have enough. I have more than enough, and I have enough to give to someone else. And the other thing too is that it's amazing what happens to yourself when you give. When you just give someone else your own time, your expertise, or of course money, then you start to realize, wow, you know what? Like, I have so much to bring to the world. Mm-hmm. And then your story that you're telling yourself transforms, right? Mm-hmm. So then also your behavior, your strategy also transforms in the meantime. So, it is kind of there's a scientific method, but there's also a little bit of a spiritual method as well, because as you mentioned, your likability. I mean, when you show up, as somebody who's giving and somebody who's willing to give without any expectation of return, I mean, people can feel that. Yeah. And that sort of energy is something that's like, man, I got to have this person around. I really want this person to be around me. And I can't tell you exactly why, but I just feel like they mean well. I feel like they're here to help. And so then more opportunities come your way. And yeah, I've absolutely seen that myself. And, it's one of my biggest goals this year is to make sure that I get into more of a habit of giving. And it's not because I want to just receive more, but I know it's the right thing to do. And I know that, giving is better than receiving, but this is the other side benefit of giving and of contributing, is receiving more.
I 100% know, and I've been told by my mentor, and it's not always for positive. So I digress. But he has told me that my energy and how I show up has got me into more rooms and conversations. That's why I'm where I am, because I'm so passionate about being the best version of myself and showing up and adding value. People got to understand the 2 biggest relationships I have in real estate for investor wise is from DMs and Instagram. Wow. And there is, hey, how can I add value to you? How can I want you to be my mentor. Yeah. How can I add value? Once again, we're back to the friction point. You see a need, you pull it from their life, they're forever grateful. Right. Yeah. And so that compounds on compounds, and me and you, we could talk for 9 years. We'll have you part 2 soon, But let's talk about, you have a podcast
Yep.
that I think is out of this world. I made my podcast, my producer, I made him listen to yours, and I said, we're going to do it exactly like this.
That's awesome.
So he was like, man, this stuff is good. So talk to people about your podcast, your coaching, how they can find you, how they can, they can hunt you down.
Yeah. Well, just a few things really quick. If any of your listeners haven't read the book, Never Eat Alone, I would highly recommend that, because it is all about giving without any expectation of anything in return.
Okay.
And it's about developing that network and developing, friendships, relationships. And at the end of the day, success, I think, in anything depends on your relationship with yourself, but also your relationship with other people. And so I just wanted to make a plug of that. I'm literally looking at the book. You just reminded me of it as you were saying that. But as far as your question, thank you for your kind words regarding the podcast. It's called Elevate, and really it's all about elevating to a life without limits, combining real estate investing, successful real estate investing, along with personal and professional growth, and committing to constant and never-ending improvement. Because I think the combination of those forces is what allows folks to live a life without limits. And we've had some of the world's top entrepreneurs, real estate investors, personal growth experts, coaches, you name it, on the show. And we talk about, what's the mindset, the habits, the routines, the systems, the tools, the strategies, the psychology behind elevating to a life without limits, because it is about combining those things. And so we distill that and we dissect that from the world's greatest individuals. And, like last week, we just had David Allen from Getting Things Done on the show, which many of your listeners may be aware of, but it's sort of a global movement on personal productivity. And just as an example, I mean, it was so interesting because I read that book and I was like, man, this is totally life-changing. The cover of this book looks like the most boring thing on the planet. And so I bring this guy on, and he's kind of like a hippie. I mean, he's kind of like a little bit of a spiritual hippie. Yeah. But it's so interesting because you can apply these innovative thoughts from one side of sort of the esoteric corners of the world to real estate and to developing your own life and designing your own life. And so that's what Elevate's all about. So definitely you can find us on any platform, whether it's Apple, YouTube, you name it. I mean, Spotify, SoundCloud, anything out there. So we're definitely having a great time. We were top 200 business podcasts in the world. And
amazing. You just started too.
Yeah, we just started.
That's amazing.
In August 2019. So there's that. And if anybody wants to learn more about coaching, they can go to coachwithtyler.com, coachwithtyler.com. So that's you can definitely find out more about how that works. And what we'll do is we'll set up a 45-minute coaching discovery session with anybody who's interested. And that's free. It's complimentary. And, it'll actually be sort of an expectation of what they can expect, working with me one-to-one. And it's not like a big program where I put a bunch of videos together. This is literally tailor-made one-to-one service working with individuals. And it's really made for real estate investors. So folks who are looking to get from where they are to where they want to be, they want to get some more clarity. They want to develop the systems. They want to develop the strategies. They want to understand what limiting beliefs are and how to, cultivate, an empowering belief system on a continual basis, and a very strong belief system that's going to allow them to live and design a life without limits through real estate, in addition to, time management, accountability, so on and so forth. But, definitely that's the way to find out more about that is coachwithtyler.com.
100%. Guys, I would check that out for sure. I would imagine, if I had ventured to guess, this guy's probably going to write a book soon. I bet he's been thinking about it. Yeah.
Yes, it is in process. Who knows, man? Maybe the coronavirus will keep us inside for 6 more months, and maybe I'll get,
get that book out.
Yeah, dude, it's in process. Absolutely.
I love it, man. Well, I've had a pleasure talking to you. I want to thank everybody out there for listening. If you like what we're talking about, be sure to rate us and share us. I just want to thank y'all so much. I hope you enjoyed this episode and take action on what you did. There's a lot of books in there that we talked about. Reach out to him personally. I know he'd be happy to answer any questions that you had. And I guess the biggest thing I want to leave everybody with is, what is a piece of advice that you would offer anybody during this time of uncertainty, during this time of the virus, and kind of what people can be doing, right now. I feel like this is separation time. This is separation time where you can learn a new skill. You can bone up. You don't have the excuses anymore because you can't leave your house. So what do you think?
I think it's so true, man. It's separation time. It's time to work on your inner self. It's time to continue to develop relationships. There's still no excuse. I mean, you can still have discussions like this. Really, you know what? Honestly, it's how do we adapt at this point in time? It's not an excuse time, because a lot of people are saying, well, I set these goals 2 months ago, and you know what? The circumstances are not going to let that happen. So the question is, how do you adapt? And what is this teaching us, right? What is this circumstance allowing us to understand, and how is this happening for us and not to us, is really important. So what's your inner voice saying, and how can you adapt and become stronger on the other side of this?
Amen. I think you will be surprised when we come out of this, the amount of innovative new ways that we're doing business. And I think that, things are coming out now where you're like, whoa, they've had that in the hopper, but now they have to release it. And it's just crazy to see where we're going to be. Man, thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate it. And everybody have a great day.
Awesome. Ton of fun, man.
You got it.
Thank you for listening to Construct Your Life with Austin Linney. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and pay it forward by sharing with a friend. Most importantly, take this opportunity to start constructing your life by taking immediate action on what you learned. For show notes, resources, and more information on one-on-one coaching with Austin, visit constructyourlifepodcast.com.